Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. Let's just thought we do today. Let's start out with some warm-ups, but integrating breath into the warm-up stretches. Okay, so one of the things to do, just start out, for example, in breath, out breath. Now I'm really kind of doing this motion through the nose, out the nose, so that you can, generally if I breathe in, mouth in, mouth out. There's styles where you go in through the nose, in and out. But I kind of find people kind of go, they kind of overdo that. So I do nose and out. Yeah. Now, a couple things on that. I play the game, we start breathing through the nose, the air comes in the ears. And I kind of, not lock, but kind of tense the lower core area so that that breath comes in. And then here, that kind of bottom goes top, top goes bottom. Okay, so then that kind of really, so. It's not about how much air I take in, how much air I can spend that. It's just or you can play games like that. Now we can play the same process here. You can go up on the toes sometimes and we can go either way, but yeah. Here we can spread apart a little bit more. So we can even see some of this on the ground, including your breathing in the stretch. For example, just sort of cotton, but with energy kind of coming in, releasing the other way, expanding. Just feel it all the way down the tail. stretch down here. Extend the right leg out. I might go a couple of times in and out. Let's stretch for the hamstrings. Got a dense physical body. And just kind of breathe. I can get the test for energy is moving through the body. So if you had to stretch them both thighs. The leg feels long. So then release on the other side. And good stretch. So. Cycle of 1, 2, 3 breaths. Then 1, 2, 3. This is a stretch from the Alan Blow. I studied with him for a couple of years when I was in grad school at Davis. He would come from Oakland. You bring this in. 1, 2, 3 breaths. And if you like, you can extend out. Sit comfortable if you like. And in breath, out breath. Or the very end, since you like stretching the 3 pattern, 1, 2, 3. So we're doing breath, 2, 3. See, if you're doing it more than 3 times, you're exercising. So he was obviously moving something. 1, 2, 3 pattern. You can't do it as exercise. But now here, so same pattern. Breathe. Tension, gathering, release, opening. But again, it's not just the arm. Bring it down to the tailbone. So we practice, we're just moving the, but we're kind of working the beat. That beat can speed up or that beat, butterfly can give rise to progeny. So breath itself, breath and motion are very important. For example, I've done with in the hands. Or even your arms, get an idea of under stress. We don't do a lot, but yeah. Standing up for a bit, for all of a sudden they're going to fill up and pull down, relax. After that initial boom, body starts to lengthen. Notice the boom. That's how the in breath starts. Out breath, in breath, in breath. And we also get a bit we call a kind of a pyramid structure, a toroidal system. Let's go down, gathers, re-expands out. Okay, so yeah, just kind of standing here, feeling the body a bit. It's a physical body, I'm not sure, but stretching. Get in touch with something like called the energy body. Physical body. Many different ways of looking at the energy body. For example, like the energy body can be kind of like jello. There are waves that can go through that jello. Now, I think the idea of it, you got the ankles feel that way. The elbows feel that. The gut is part of that. If I kind of pause here. That deed is going on, even though I'm not necessarily moving with it. So establishing that, I don't feel straighter. Shoulders instead of being pulled forward or open, so down like that. So we did a little bit of stretching. And your body wants to move. Doing an exercise flat for me. I'll do the same thing, but if I said wants to expand, hands fully extended, but expansion is going, but I like to come back. First, but here is a step back. It's almost like that motion back is more. Move around a little bit, just feel what might be going on when we make the transition from a physical body, physical exercise to an energy body. Okay. Yeah, let's check in for a bit. So, say there's some stretching, some warming up. What's going on that wasn't going on when I was just started glass and kind of oriented everything up here and out there. What's going on? That wasn't going on before. Okay, anybody with a question or comment? Cliff, what do you feel is going on? You did some breathing, some stretching, some warming up. What's going on for you that wasn't going on for you before? I think.
Well, I'm a little less creaky.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, in other words, creak, creak, creak. And the movement, the stretching is important, but maybe there's something else going on. Okay. But yeah, creak, pop, so wow. Dojima Sensei one time, he did this thing where he knew his body so well. He would go like that and produce a sound, go like that, and produce a sound, go like that, produce a sound. And so he started playing this song, going this way and getting snap, crackle, pops all over. Everybody cracked up. Okay, but he knew his body that well. He was kind of having fun with it, right? But yeah, we have the snap, crackle, pop phenomenon, but okay. Anybody else? Anything they noticed? What do you have now that you didn't have before? Before and after, it's whatever. Anybody?
Sensei, this is funny.
Yeah, hi.
It actually reminded me of a place where I was before when I was more into this flow, where when I did the single breath and was doing an Aikido motion technique, that the technique just seemed to flow without effort with that single breath.
Well, that's why they talk about Kokyu, right? Kokyu is not supposed to. Kokyu is the breath is actually, in some sense, something that's going on. So I'm here with ideas about movement and everything, but a clear bit, get more into what's called an energy body, energy space. And then you get the stress from part of energy kind of congealing, densifying, opening. And then the movements come out of that. Your physical movement, switch to a more of an energy body space, and there's an energy movement, but more connected. All right? And some of that's the stretching, but some of that's just I've shifted dimensions. Okay? Anybody else? What do you have now that you didn't have before we went through that stretching? I remember, I think it was 2001, Linda Holiday Sensei and I went to visit Donald Sensei, the Shingu Kumano area. And, so we paid our respects to Kikizuchi Sensei. Okay. And, when he was there, he was at the time, sort of towards the end, he wasn't really getting on the mat and training. He did a ceremony. He showed up for one of the dojo ceremonies, and he gave a lecture. He didn't do any technique or anything, but he was, and we visited him in his house, and he was talking about various things. And he just one time just went, "Kami-sama." And it wasn't like it was Kami-sama. Let's put his hand out. He was in a kind of feeling opening space, and he says, "Kami-sama." In other words, right there in that room, there were these energies: fire, water, water. It's kind of this spiral dance. I thought that was very interesting. And sometimes, it's always going on, but we're too busy here. Something that those Sensei and I have recent discussion on is our senses are flawed. So all this I dialogue going on. We see this world. We have worries, concerns, and all of a sudden our senses are flawed. So I got to do something like learn how to breathe or how to stretch open to get past that. And a lot of that is probably what our sensei meant by misogi. So right here, what do I have? I got my arm out. I know I'm supposed to extend out. What do I have that I didn't have before? A sense of interior calm, but that the sense of the arm is going out much further than my physical arm. In fact, it's also connected here, so it's not like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go. There's nothing. If I recognize it, well, there's a balance goes out the other hand too. As I shift a little bit more into an interior energy space with the body and these movements. Now, for example, that was from our second Tai Chi movement. In fact, all the different Tai Chi movements, you are doing these physical movements, learning how to relax, but really, those are movements or patterns of energy that just are going on to some degree irrespective of the body. Like here, for example, there's a pulse. I call it a pulse because it feels like a pulse. An energy beat. But that beat can also expand out, come back on itself, deepen. But I thought it was interesting what Hiki-Zuchi says, that brings hand down and coming some. The energy is spiraling. So, yeah, we should know about it, read about it. Now here the spiral's getting bigger. Now you can also kind of drift off this way. Keeping your alignment here. And of course, it's going out that way. It must be going out. We're coming back on itself the other way. And of course, that can just be the arm, or just, I can sort of know about it, begin to feel it, but that movement is going all the way through the hips. Okay, so now, I'm going to ask, we did the stretching, I just sat down and just began to do some sitting exercises. Anybody, what do you have now that you didn't have before? Anybody? What do you notice?
Sensei, this is Cliff.
Yeah.
My breathing is a little steadier.
Your breathing is a little what?
Steadier, smoother,
Yeah.
deeper.
Yeah, your breathing is always an indicator of where you are. When the senses are clogged, everything's up here, out there, breathing is. Breathing gets deeper, steadier. Okay. Anybody else? Good one?
Yeah, this is Audrey.
Yes.
I don't know, my spirit body kind of feels more connected to my physical body,
Okay.
which kind of feels like the key is flowing through both of them rather than just one.
Yeah. Okay.
Or not at all, because when I start class, I'm scattered and now it's more focused.
Yeah.
Kind of like glue.
Okay. Yeah. So she's talking about, just the fact that, your physical body, busy thinking all these thoughts about what's going on. And, to some degree, what happens when we shift our emphasis? So all of a sudden she's feeling something she might call spirit body. And she feels the energy flowing. So that's a lot of that physical body. I can move, I can exercise, but shift dimensions of body. Other things start to open up. If it's a mental exercise, and some of it, of course, you are keeping track, so yeah, the mind is also somewhat active. But the senses get contaminated around that interior dialogue. So you start to kind of settle, or open, or stretch, or move off of these energy beats. Something starts to open up. Okay? Anybody else?
Sensei, this is Bonnie.
Yeah, hi.
I observed, I was feel sensing with my hands as I moved, and I observed
Okay.
that the hands and arms, they felt and looked closer, but also felt and looked much further away as I was breathing and extending. And it felt like the spine was relaxing with that, as if they were moving from the spine.
Yeah, okay. In other words, everything really, nervous system, spine, there's that communication that has to go on. But on the other hand, there are finer levels of integration. Like here, all of a sudden, the arms feel like they're reaching past the physical. We keep going that way. Last night, I watched a couple of episodes of this show on the CW, Superman and Lois, and all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, if I ever do that, take off, that becomes fine. But you feel like the arm feels longer, and of course the spine center and the arm will lengthen. The arm, see, it just gets longer out there. I'm looking at the horizon. And then, I do the arms, for example, for me, I start to pick up the updraft. So I get better coordination in my hips and knees, and ankles, toes. And I'm using body, but the feeling right here. So something starts to swell, expand this way. And sitting. There's all that going on, but there's also kind of a stillness, calm going on. If I check my breathing is deeper, more rhythmic. Okay, yeah. Okay, so all those are good. All right. Anybody else share anything about, what do you have now that you didn't have before? It's always a good check because, we get, okay, I'm going to do. That's the way that Mary Annie Sensei put it there, or Sensei said in the class. Do something more than, what do you have now that you didn't have before? So we're developing the ability to get out of that clogged senses area into deeper, finer levels of ourselves. Okay. So almost anything. Okay. Let's. Let me just take very basic patterns. David, what I'd like you to do is maybe I can do it. Let me see here. Okay, now what I'm going to do with your permission is I'm going to spotlight you. I want you to take everybody through the 30 movement with the staff spear. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to spotlight you right now, And add spotlight. Okay, so now David is up. And if you have it, just grab something that you can get, and we'll go. Just take them through it a couple of times, just 1 through 30. Okay.
Okay. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Okay, why don't you take them through it once again?
Okay.
Okay, good. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the spotlight back. So let's go here. All right, and oops. Spotlight. Okay, so we're back. Okay, so that's a set of movements, but we're going to go back through the same thing. What do you have now that you didn't have before? I mean, you've viewed some movements, you've got some movement in, there's some exercise associated with it, but what do you have now that you didn't have before? Okay? That's always a good question to ask. And the docent say had something that was kind of interesting. He says it's impossible to get worse. Oh no, not a script. Okay, I just did something. Now, what do I have now that I didn't have before? Anybody, Cliff, want to jump in on that one? You can have more questions. That's also possible. Anything? Okay.
Well, it's nice to do
Yes.
the movements as a group again. I've been practicing it on my own,
Yeah.
but there's no feedback in any
Yeah.
way, right? So,
Yep, yeah, one of the things about, we got the classes now Wednesdays and Sundays, but this contact time is indoors, so we haven't been doing the weapons as much. Okay. But anything, so, basically, it is tricky because, we can go through rote patterns and we get better at doing it in a rote pattern way. Okay. But a lot of times, asking that question, that's why I thought it was an interesting thing to bring up, because the docent says, it's impossible to get worse. And the question is sometimes, I'm getting worse, I'm forgetting this, but what do I have now I didn't have before? Well, all of a sudden, I've got the ground to stand up, sit down a little better, or pay attention to focus in on something, or conversely relax and open to other possibilities. That's a very important question to ask. Now, the question, what I said is, do you have some questions now that you did that? That's also, what do you have now? I have more questions. That's good. So you don't have to, this very open process. Let's try. Okay. For example, we can go through 30. Here I am. Stop. And yeah, I was just kind of going through the exercise a little bit more mentally as David was doing it. But what I kind of noticed through that, the movements kind of tend to group. Okay, like for example, 1, 2, so they group together. And 3, they group together. 4, want to hang out with certain other movements. Right here, they're really grouping together. It's almost like, you have a flock of birds and they're going somewhere together. Right? So this movement and this movement start to group together. Or this movement and this movement, they start to group together. So that's what I notice. Okay? Go through. You can join me if you like. That one, the groupings were larger. 5 to 6 movements kind of grouped together. And when the movements group together, they have a flow or an interconnectedness to them. So that's what I said. Did I have that at the beginning? No. I was going to do another set. Chances are there would be even more. I could ask that question. What do I have now that I didn't have before? Okay. Anybody? Observation or question? Anybody?
Sensei, this is Bunny. I noticed
Yes.
something with this and the previous before my internet cut out. I noticed with our breathing, and when we did the Joe at first, it was easier to feel the transition points relative to the breath, the transition balance points as points where I could or should slow down for practice, because sometimes the breathing's too fast paced if I go at that slower speed. But when we did this at the faster pace, I noticed that multiple movements became the single breath. And so I was able
Yeah.
to see the bigger balance transition points and find that where I can go faster once I focused on the smaller points.
Well, the groupings can expand. Or conversely, you can phrase it differently. Okay? I mean, what I noticed, when I was, pick the trumpet up and I'm playing, and, I recorded myself, right? Go, da, 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 da. It's kind of from high school band, playing too many marches, But I noticed when Chet Baker played, he went da, 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 da. See, the actual beats don't change, but the way that he da, 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 da. He never played that refrain twice the same way. And so I said, well, that's kind of cool. And so I got to where I could do that somewhat, not the great he could do it. So, even though it's not, you're playing the notes, you're phrasing. Now, he would always respect, within 4 beats, the next 4 beats. But within those 4 beats, there are so many different permutations that are possible. And Art Frank, one of his good friends, says, Jim, you never play anything the same way twice. Huh. Now, that's not to say, you look at O Sensei. I think that O Sensei said one time O Sensei comes in. So I got the new technique, and everybody else looked at it and said, he's just doing EQ. So, but the question would be, what does he have now he didn't have before? What's going on here? What is a new technique? You see what I mean? And ultimately, what happens is if you're constantly reviving yourself, there's certain things. You're playing a song. There's the point, if you try to play jazz, which I try to do sometimes, is that you basically have the main piece, which you have to be able to play. And then you have the same chord structure, and you improvise off of it. And one time, I put something on, and Art Frank listened to it, liked it. And he said, you're playing like Chet played. And the way he codified it is Baker didn't understand chord structure. He did not follow the chord sequence. But he played around and through the structure of the chords, which is, what I attempt to do when I pick up a horn. Okay? Now, what we're doing with 30 movements is, there's a melody. Now, you can then begin to keep the structure of it in your phrasing. So you may find groupings flow together. You may find your breathing shifts. If your breathing shifts, you're shifting locations or dimensions. And why don't we notice it? Because our senses are flawed. And there doesn't say a lot of what it works on with people. There's thinking, there's feeling, there's sense feeling, sensing. Right about here, sensing. Before the stand-up, there's a couple of waves swelling from underneath. So your physical movement, at some point today, it initially comes in spurts. And then what just happened? You're operating off of your sensing of the energy. there are beats in there. There are transitions. Or conversely, all that's going on, there's also a stillness through which all those things are happening. That could be an idea. Body's in that stillness. I can feel my feet. Feel the contact with the chair. I feel, for example, if I'm a little too pulled out, the shoulders kind of come up and go forward. So a lot of this is down the back, through the seat to the ribs, underneath the feet. It's almost, and then you start to put the column up. The column starts to have its own sort of breath alignments. So those are just examples. What did I just do? I'll do an experiential thread, just like I'm trying to follow the word structure in a musical piece. Anyway, so that's always a good one. Okay, so the 30 movements. What do you have now you didn't have before? It's a good question to begin to ask. Right about that, there's an alertness, so I need to move very quick. I think, or it's kind of a nice calm here. So you can really focus on discrimination. You make the decisions, if maybe there's almost no different from this and that, but discernment. Okay. So those are things that you can't, you don't have to, but you can develop. Oh, okay. You can use the staff for this, or you can. Most of the time we pick this up and just start to get busy doing certain moves, which we probably get to. For example, you rotate this, the cutting edge. It's an ascending note, but at the same time, there's a lot of support for it. So you can rotate, change. Everything else can. So the sword by itself is it's an expanding motion. That also is a spiral. So if I go this way, you get to the end, and it's solid. This is adaptable. I get there with choices and possibilities. So you can pick the sword up. Some of the warm-ups I've done are good because I'm kind of starting to pick up an energy beat from the floor up through the hips. Suppose okay, I'm that sword on this one. Beat can get deeper, thicker, or it can go. Just a quick dribble with a basketball. Okay. Beautiful. Seriously, noticing. How do you put one beat with a thud? But basic level, just warming up with So swing a couple times. Yeah, we didn't do that for very long, but if I said, what's going on? What do I have now? I didn't have on before I picked this up. There's a harmonic around the, somewhere between the knees and really about more ankle level. For example, a sword, you know, if you just swing this way, you tend to get strong in these two things. But right about the so in basketball, there's a term called ankle breaker. It's where you go like that, and the defender looks at you and tries to stay with you, and they fall down. It's just, you know, basically it's like an Aikido throw. No contact, but boom, all of a sudden, it's an ankle breaker. And so if I was trying to Stephen Curry, I have an ankle breaker. If I go this way, then I go the other way, and the other way, trying to would oftentimes twist their ankles and fall down. Okay. So there's some energy kind of down there that, you know, associated with the basketball team. I didn't have that for it. So. Anybody? You swung a couple times. What do you have now that you didn't have before? It's a game. If you start to research it, then you oftentimes you have a tool you didn't have before. So if you, but you know, just your own practice. Just your own practice. It's a good question. We have a couple of minutes. I was planning on doing a sword, but you could segue into sound. So let's try, if you're kind of bashful, just mute your own system. You start with the ah sound. Ready? Yeah. Just going to check in for a second. Where now? Yeah. Well, a lot of times you sort of get a center line column. Then getting one that is more, it's kind of a square. Almost looking over there. Okay. I didn't have that before I did the sound. Anybody? Sound, by the way, is a good way of practicing that. Anybody? What do you have now that you didn't have before you did a couple of those chants? Anybody?
I'm feeling a little more grounded.
Yeah, okay, yeah. There's no reason why you go, a couple times, you all of a sudden the ground starts becoming more experiential. Yeah, those are things, that's good. Anybody else? What do you have now that you didn't have before? Just did a couple of sentences.
It feels like it opened up my practice area, almost like a sage cleansing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there are rituals and other things, you know, if you're Native American or whatever it is. And, you know, you chant, all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay. All right. So you see what Sensei said, that the senses are so clogged that we got to unclog them. But a lot of the practices we're doing are really just simply to unclog the senses again to a more experiential sense with yourself. Able, once those senses are beginning to be unclogged, there are other realms and possibilities and levels of ourselves that open up. Okay, anybody else with an observation? What do you have now that you didn't have before?
Sensei, this is Bonnie.
Yes.
I've had a bunch of words flow through my mind as they're sorting out the real answer. So I'm not there yet, but the words that have flowed through, patience, different perspective, nothing as in clearing, returning to zero, so nothingness.
Okay.
And then a question just popped in my head, what don't I have now that I did have before? And my fear is reduced because I have a fear of making noise in this apartment.
Well, a lot of times, you know, what happens if questions come up, that's good. What am I, you know? And when you get the question, oh, you had a bunch of them, that's good. But take one and soak it. I mean, well, since they told Sada how to learn to wait, he was teaching them to learn to soak. So take one of those, just soak it. And then there will be another one, just soak with that question. When you're soaking, you're not trying to figure it out. Okay. And Mr. O had to figure out how he could hit when he was standing on one leg. When he was on two legs, he had this crazy hits, but he stood on one leg. Boom. Then he came to the realization that I don't have to do this anymore. So he stopped standing on one leg, couldn't do anything. So he says, you know, on two legs, I'm just like everybody else. On one leg, I'm a special hitter. Okay. So he had to soak in what Sensei told him. Learn to wait. You can paraphrase that, learn to soak. Anybody else on that one? Okay. So the sounds, you could have done O, could have done the Su chant. But some of that I'll play with a bit. In other words, you know, got a little time. For Cliff, maybe the kids are occupied and you know, just do something. Just sort of sit quietly. What do I have now? I didn't have before. Well, if nothing else, just for a couple of seconds to hit through. Okay. I'm going to sit for just a couple more seconds. Body's supposed to open up from the interior. A couple more seconds, just a second, simplicity. Something gathering from under. The tree grows from its seed through roots. The trees can grow, be around for thousands of years until we mess them up. So, yeah, I think those are just things you can kind of, no particular thing, just settle for a couple of seconds. We have now. Okay, anyway, what we're going to do, let's see. Well, we will be in Mountain View on Sunday. 11:30 to 1. If you can be there because you're out of state, then it will be shot and put online. Okay? Okay. So I thank you all for tuning in today.
Thank you, Sensei.